Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, destination Manhattan, Kansas, and the octagon of opportunity. And how real is the Red Raider pursuit of a new quarterback?
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. And thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you once again, and a whole lot to dive into on today's episode. You know I really mean it. Check the tapes. I've never said it before. We are catching up on some news from the land of Red Raider football as the portal window continues to remain open, and it appears maybe the Red Raider portal party or palooza is ongoing here locally as well. I want to get into some interesting things that were playing out kind of over the weekend as Tech was tied into some national speculation as it related to a quarterback, that one being Carson Beck, who is a prominent name, of course. And I think also locally there was extreme interest because there was just a general question about we're pursuing a quarterback. Whether the name association is real, the general venture was also something that came maybe to some as a bit of a surprise. So a whole lot to get into there as far as we continue on within the portal window, and we'll get into that quarterback context specifically, but also wanted to set the table to kick off our conversation because it is a Red Raider game day for a matchup with K-State coming up as Grant McCasland and the Red Raiders are back on the road. They're trying to bounce back from a tough one to take at United Supermarkets Arena as they fall in overtime to Iowa State. I don't know what's going on with Kansas State this season. What is happening with that program? They're trying to shake off a 3-game conference skid of their own. They've got one league win, I believe sub 500 on the season. You know you're headed to the octagon. You're on the road in the Big 12. These things typically proving very dangerous for you, Chris, but you're looking to shape this into an octagon of opportunity coming up, which I'm sure will be much easier said than done, man. What's the lay of the land as we get into a tough setting here, but one that features an opponent that's going through some strange things so far this season?
Yeah, and I said this on yesterday's show, but this is either the best time to play these dudes or the worst. Not sure which. They've got a brutal schedule coming up. You're in the middle of that. I mean, I think they go. It's like they just had Houston. They've got you. Then they've got Kansas and in Lawrence, and then I think they play Baylor the game after that. And I think it doesn't get much easier even after that, but. They are 1-3. The only win they've got is their first conference game was a home win over Cincinnati on New Year's Eve, I guess it was. And they're just not – it's going to go without saying. They're not scoring more points than the opposition. Duh. But they're just not scoring in general. And they're turning it over about 15 times a game, only forcing about 9 a game. They're getting out rebounded. There's just not really any metric you can look at and go they can – their prized acquisition in the offseason was Coleman Hawkins, who I think cost a pretty penny. He's a 10-7 guy on the season, and he's about a 14-10 guy in league play. David Gasson is one of their main holdovers. They're nucleus type players. He's been statistically pretty good, but these are bigs for these guys, and so the problem has come from they're just not very good at guard right now, or they're not producing. And they're just searching. And is this a bunch – because I think that people around the league are being like, Kansas State's a mess. And they are talented. Brendan Howson is a good guard, but he's not – he's a sniper. He's a guy that is going to – he's from right up the road in Amarillo. And I think there was some talk a couple of 3 years ago that Texas Tech was heavily involved. He ended up choosing to go to Villanova. And I think spent 2 years there, and then he's since transferred to Kansas State, obviously. But he's a guy that is a great shooter. I don't know how good he is on the defensive end, but they're so that they just struggle to score in general. And so here's what's interesting is I look at what their struggles are and how they're built versus like what you are. like this is theoretically a team that I think that you would say, let's get into a shootout. Like we can't outscore you. But it's also a team to where if they're scoring in the 80s, your defense is really bad. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's what kind of game you want to get into. I don't know, but I think you have a lot more weapons on offense than this team does, or at least to this point. I mean, you're talking about a team that they have some weird losses. They lost a close game to Drake in the non-conference. Now, this is a team that you scrimmaged, and I think you went toe-to-toe with them, and I think Drake's pretty good. Ben McCollum, if you remember that name, he's the head coach at Drake. They lost a game to Liberty. But there's some that, they lost to LSU. There's no harm in that. They've lost to, obviously, their conference losses. There's not really any necessarily bad ones in there, but it's just how it's happening. And Houston is going to humble many a team in this league. And I fear for our chances when you play those guys twice, whether it's in Houston or even in Lubbock, just the way that they're built, I think it's a really bad matchup for you, and I think it was a bad matchup for Kansas State. So you don't want to look too much into that one specifically, but they just gave up like 50-plus points in the paint to Houston, but you did too to Iowa State. Now, maybe that says more about Houston and Iowa State. So both of these teams, because you'll have a sense of urgency as well. You're kind of on this yo-yo right now to where I guarantee you that this Texas Tech staff is going to have your team playing harder and a sense of urgency and kind of panicked and kind of, trying to strain a bit just because that's what it takes on the road. And you showed that up in the state of Utah, but you're going to need to do it again in Manhattan. I just don't know at all really what version. I think this is more about what version of Kansas State do you see versus what version of Texas Tech, because I think that this is a team, I would say, that you don't probably have to play great and still beat. Now, you can't show up and play poorly and hope to win. Students will be back in Manhattan because there wasn't a whole lot of people there at the game over the weekend versus Houston, but students I think will be back, but they're 7-8, as you said. I don't know if fans have been like checked out, or I don't know what to expect there from just Kansas State in general.
Yeah, you think about all the things that Kansas State brings to it, but I think regardless of opponent, the matchup would be one that's really a challenge for Texas Tech because of what you just came from. So you're trying not to allow that to linger into a second game, and obviously you got to be able to pick yourself back up after what I'm sure was an emotionally exhausting and in other ways affair on Saturday. So I wonder kind of who you turn to try and sort of calm those waters, if you will. If you're in Grant McCaslin's shoes, Chris, what do you think you're really wanting to try to execute, or who is it with for Tech to get the game started and kind of get out and try and get into a rhythm early?
Well, so what you're going to deal with is, again, a lot of their scoring is coming from their bigs in Gasson and Hawkins. Your post defense, but also how your guards play, handle that part. I don't think you'll deal like Iowa State was so good at getting into the paint because their guards were so good at breaking you down and getting into the paint and doing some different things, getting downhill and putting you on your heels. That's not or shouldn't be much of the issue. This will be more about how do you guard these guys with their back to the basket? In other words, does D5 share that load? Does JT Toppin, can he stay out of foul trouble early? Because that would be a big deal here. Because one thing we didn't talk about in yesterday's show is we look back on that Iowa State game. I'll tell you who did not play well, and he was just kind of a non-factor, which was disappointing, was Federico. He had a couple of really good games, I thought, and factored in Utah, and he just looked a step slow and just kind of fumbling the ball around a bit and just was not really a part of.
Pushed around a little bit, I thought.
Yep, and it just looked like he was in third gear and he needed to be in fourth or fifth, and he didn't play a ton of minutes, and Grant was very frustrated with him. He needs to factor in tonight. That's just all there is to it. I don't know if there can be a plan B there. And Hawkins is a fascinating deal. There was some, you may remember his name from back in the spring or early summer as it relates to Texas Tech.
First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Whether it's sports, music, comedy, or beyond, we all love going to live events. And now Gametime has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature, Gametime Picks. This feature trims all the fat to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You'll always find can't beat deals. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app today, create an account, and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime.
Remember his name from back in the spring or early summer as it relates to Texas Tech. When you were in the JT Toppin hunt, there were rumors that Coleman Hawkins was going to take a visit to Texas Tech or was on campus.
Yeah.
Actually had taken a visit to Texas Tech. You were still looking for a big. I think, remember what was our guy from Utah? Hold on. I think he was from Utah State. He ended up going to University of Washington on a
Abasor, great.
Yep, great Abasor. I think that's right. Good call. Yep. Well, you pulled that one out. Kudos to you, sir.
How could you forget great Abasor?
Yeah, but remember the rumored price tag there.
Oh yeah.
And I think Coleman Hawkins was even like, yeah, I'll get more than that. Or there was something on social media. Well, and I think that he got close to it or did get more than that. He was a pretty penny, and it just really hasn't. He's been a good player or a piece to the puzzle, but he hasn't been great. And is that their problem, or is it more of a guard problem for Kansas State, or is it all the above? But it's just not working. And I think they took a lot of pieces here, and it really hadn't gelled. And I think they're trying to figure out what. Because he was even asked, Jerome Tang was asked after the game versus Houston, how do you get to the free throw line more? The other teams are getting to the free throw line a lot against you. How do you get that aspect of what you want to help you score more points? Because they're just averaging 63 a game in Big 12 play. And he's just like, that's a good question. He really had no answer for it. And part of that is just they're just, I hate to keep saying it, but they're Doug McDaniel and CJ Jones, I think is his name. It just their guards are just not up to par. So I would hope that you can, at least to this point, one of those guys came in from Michigan. They've got a Cal State Fullerton transfer, Illinois Chicago transfer, and this is a game where Elijah Hawkins and Christian Anderson and Chance McMillan. You're Overton. You need, because Overton hadn't played. He's KO. He's put together a couple of subpar games here. He was a kind of a non-factor against BYU for the most part, and really didn't do a whole lot versus Iowa State.
I thought he might be the name you were going to mention a moment ago. When you said Puerto Rico, but he stuck out to me also. Yeah.
Yeah, but that group needs to help you win this game tonight. That's just all there is to it. They need to collectively win that matchup, and they'll have to help in the post if that's the way that they're gonna play, and kind of try to back you down and slow it down a bit and let those guys score, because where a lot of those points come from those two bigs is the rebounding and the putbacks and things like that. So that's where this group will have to help dig down with your post defense and then help rebound them and all this stuff. So we'll see. You've won. I felt like, I think I said it in the yesterday's show, that you hadn't really won there a whole bunch. You've won. I looked it up to be sure. You've won like 3 times in the last. You may even be like 3-2 in your last 5 there in that building when Bruce Weber was coaching. Your last one was like in 2021. I think you won like the Elite 8 year, I think, as well. So it hadn't been just forever, but it just is always a weird environment. It's a weird place to play. And maybe I'm rubbing my basketball and football brain together, because I know what the record is in football, and it's not good up there. So maybe my The lavender or the purple is clouding my brain as it relates to the sports, but it just feels like you don't particularly play well up there, and we'll see what we get. But maybe you just catch them. A fast start would help, because I think it creates doubt, and then you get them going, God dang, we're just not any good. That would be nice, because any hope that you give them, you just don't want to instill any confidence in them at all. So a fast start, and that's what Houston did. Houston jumped on those dudes early, but that's going to happen to a lot of teams when it comes to the Cougs.
All right, we'll see how it turns out and chop it up on the other side, better for worse. Texas Tech, of course, as they hit the road now, maybe with a little confidence, a little momentum after you do what you did most recently in Utah. So maybe you can carry some of that into this one as you try to bounce back from the home loss against Iowa State. Back where the home fires are burning, the portal fires are still burning. Want to check in on that with you, Chris, before we get out of here. First, today's episode brought to you by TurboTax. Taxes was dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. Now, Taxes is easily uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. An expert who's backed by the latest technology, which cross-checks millions of data points for 100% accuracy. And while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress, and you get the most money back guaranteed. And while you go about your day, it's all happening with no stressing, no worrying, and no waiting. Now, this is Taxes with Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Saw some things continue on through the weekend that obviously we knew would be in motion. As we've talked about on previous episodes last week, what was upcoming. There were questions about visits and things like that on the Matador Mob mailbag. But one thing very prominently going into the weekend that hit the Red Raider radar was a prominent name within the college quarterbacking landscape, that of Carson Beck. And there was a connection, or alluded to connection, between he and Texas Tech making a pursuit. So I don't really even want to get bogged down in that name or what that was all about necessarily, but maybe even more interestingly to Texas Tech fans was the general thought that not only is Texas Tech looking for a quarterback, but one of possibly starting caliber, which I guess by process of elimination only makes sense because you have already added somebody to that room, and was obviously not somebody that you felt like was going to be, in the conversation of starting quarterbacks heading into 2025. So there's a whole lot to get into here, I know, and we've had a few days to kind of process this since that happened going into the weekend. But how did that sit with you, and what do you think Red Raider fans need to know about where interests lie with a quarterback or not as we continue to move through this portal window?
Yeah, okay. So what the South Dakota State quarterback entered the portal. I mean, depending on when people are watching or consuming this, this is now, we're going on, say, 2 weeks ago. And he ends up signing with Iowa. But that was the first indication that maybe there was some interest in adding a QB based on some activity and some interest and some reports and things like that. Nothing ended up happening. I don't know if ever a visit was discussed or whatever, but there was some vetting going on. Then the Carson Beck thing, you're like, what is going on? That's when I'm like, because there's reputable folks in the space suggesting heavily, like, Texas Tech is involved here now. So I can separate some fact from fiction, because there's a couple different things. One, did you ever have any meaningful conversations with Carson Beck? No, you did not. Were there folks trying to maybe mention Texas Tech to up the price, or that's the popular thing to do? I would buy into the latter. Yes. Were you potentially looking for a quarterback? Yeah, and that's really what we're going to talk about here. That's the news, because Carson Beck, I think he was always going to go to Miami if he wasn't going to the NFL. His girlfriend is there. She's one of these influencers, and she's getting paid. I mean, she may be getting paid more money than he is. She plays for the Miami basketball team, and I think he's getting somewhere between $3 to $4 million. So I don't, and he's for the reasons we will dictate here now. He's also like wouldn't have made sense based on why you would potentially be looking for a quarterback. Okay, so let's get to that part. Why would you be looking for one? Yeah. What is going on? Because I'm like, wait a second. Like I thought everything was well. Okay, so we have a situation obviously with your quarterback having had some surgery. Is there any guarantee that he comes out of that? And not only because I think what you're thinking, donor, coach, maybe even player here, we need to be better at this position this coming season, not just as good. And certainly we can't have it be a bit worse. And there's no guarantees that you're going to get that based on this surgery. We don't know exactly how long rehab will take. You don't know what it looks like. This was an elective surgery, which tells me it's one that you didn't have to have. Is it a surgery that you felt like you needed if you're Barron and his situation, that if I want to ultimately be better, this is what I needed? Or, you know, I don't pretend to know the medical part of it, but it was clearly stated by everyone involved, elective, like you are making this choice. And I think it's a surgery he could have had a year ago. You could have done this a year ago or whenever. And you played through the season, you tried to rehab it, and there's still potentially an issue there. Because this wasn't a new injury or new cause to what's going on with you that felt the need for surgery. So you have the whole medical part of it, okay? Then you have let's get into the financial part, because these are all like things that I think are fair to ask aloud. You are in a position where I think a lot of people have donated a lot of money, and I think that, is it fair to say we gave all this money, we have acquired a lot of talent, and we may have a bit of a question at the quarterback position? Because even if you love Will Hammond, even if you think he's got the brightest of futures, which you and I would be in that camp, if you hand it over to him, he's still a question too. Okay, Barron is a question just because of the shoulder situation and all those things. So the combination of them, it's still a question. And you are in a position now where you could maybe do something about it and go, okay, can we mitigate our risk here? But how much of the finances come into this? And there's two sides of that part of it too. You may say we want to mitigate risk, and like, is there somebody out there that we can be more certain about? And that's why Carson Beck, he just had surgery too. I can't imagine you would have given a whole bunch of money and brought Carson Beck in here, and he's just had surgery by the same surgeon, ironically, and you're gonna, that's a gamble as well. So that's why I don't think that he was ever a real option. But why would you be looking for somebody? Is it health, or is this part of the negotiation? Is this part of the negotiation on the finances of NIL? Is it part of the financial, like, hey man, we can basically eliminate or mitigate our risk if we go do this? Is the Morton camp, there's been some stuff on the social media stuff that there was an ask made. I don't know what's true, what isn't. But when you put it all in the bowl, it was a bunch of conjecture, I guess, because it seems now that everything is, everybody's on the same page, and everything's okay. I mean, I could keep talking, but I want you to be able to react, and if you have questions that you want to ask about, I think that this is good conversation.
Well, I do think you understand why the reasoning would be there, to really want to make sure that you've checked every box, because you've checked so many others. That's a position that hasn't been impacted. I think the reality of the situation at that position is that the guy who played the vast majority of it and was your starter throughout the year had a good but not great necessarily year, and that's just as far as production goes on the field. But there's also the ever-present, injury layer to his story, and that's just the reality. Also, I mean, it doesn't take away from his toughness. We all know he's got that, and we all know that he's talented and capable. But that sums up number two. And then you've got a freshman who will no longer be a freshman, but a guy who's got nothing on his college resume. We know that he's got great potential, but just haven't seen it. So when you're talking about big, chances being taken, I think it's fair to look at that. And I guess I would say that, if things have come back together, if they've come back together and agreements have been made or whatever it might be, like everything else, it's fluid, it's day to day. And I understand why the Red Raiders would be open for business, so to speak, as far as improving anywhere, because they're looking to win and win right now. So I don't know why anything would be immune to that.
And here's the okay. So as we talk about, was Barron's year as good as maybe it needed to be, or could it have been better? Yes, I think we would agree there. Barron would probably say the same thing. However, it's only fair. Your offensive line wasn't very good. Okay, that part cannot be disputed. So Barron was able to do a lot of things with not much protection and not much this, not much that. Okay, so that part is fair. You also, I think, were like top 10 in the country in dropped passes as well. So that part needs to be. And then thirdly, how truly healthy was he? So all of that factors into what kind of year he had. The other part of this that I think is maybe the trickiest, you're about to have a team meeting. I don't know if it's like later today or tomorrow, where you resume the semester and you've got, these 18 portal additions. You've got a handful of early enrollees from the freshman standpoint, and you're going to set the tone for your 2025 season. What individual would be up there as kind of the face of your program on the offensive side of the ball? Arm in a sling or not, it would be Barron Morton. And I just go back to remember Joey saying, back in mid-December, way before the bowl game, is like, that's Barron's biggest task in the spring, is getting everybody on the same page and leading and getting along, and just the whole culture and chemistry and all that stuff. And that's what I was like, okay, so are you really going to just bring in somebody here and then say, hey, by the way, new QB, not only because it just kind of comes with the job, but not only do we need you to be really good and better than our quarterback was last year, who won 8 games, but we need you to kind of get to know everybody really quickly and lead and all those things too. So that's why this was such a loaded conversation, loaded topic, weird, awkward. And then maybe it's all for naught. Who knows what was real and what was not? But I mean, these were reputable folks mentioning that Texas Tech was in fact looking for a quarterback. But now I can tell you they are not. They are not. I think it will be status quo, and we'll see what that equals, because I still think there's a bit of a question there. But maybe your chemistry and culture is better for it. I don't know. I don't know. And maybe that's not worth anything either. Who knows? But it was certainly something. That's for sure.
Man, a whole lot to consider, to say the least. So
yeah.
I'd love to hear from you out there in the YouTube comments, or, of course, the Matador Mobsters. We've already heard a lot from them on this subject. The mob was in a frenzy as these things were popping off.
And I get it. I was kind of like,
oh, yeah.
I was like, wait, hold on.
But you feel like the book is closed, or this window is closed at that position?
I do for right now. The only thing that I would say alters the course here, and this would not be good news at all, is if there is some sort of sense that Barron is just health-wise, it's not right. And then at that point, maybe you revisit this in April or May. The problem there is that, okay, so you're either turning it over to Will, or you're trying to bring in your starter who missed the entire spring, and you're going to say, hey, here's the reins to the program in one of the most important seasons we've ever had. Go be really good. That is not so. Yeah, None of it gives me the warm and fuzzies. I can just tell you that right now. That's a lot to ask. But that's where we're at. So hopefully those ball squeezes are still going on for Barron. That he's supposed to be doing 1,000 of them. Says he's going to do 2,000 a day. Hopefully everything. Doctor's reports are 2 or 3 thumbs up, and he's back in April or May and starts throwing in June. And he's looking at the camera going, Red Raider Nation, what's up? And he's dropping 65 yarders to Coy Aiken like he was last summer. But even then, I guess maybe he wasn't totally right and everything. So we'll just kind of see what this whole thing looks like. But meanwhile, Will Hammond will get all the reps he wants, and he certainly needs to take a step forward too, because he may be, in fact, the most important backup QB in the conference next year.
Yeah, no doubt. Ball squeeze is the prescribed remedy. Okay.
Yep. It's like this stress ball. It's on the end of. Okay. Did I not tell you about this?
Okay. You made mention of it, I think, last time around that he was going
when he was
beyond the reps. I wasn't sure about the process though.
Yeah, it's like it's Velcro to his sling, and he's supposed to do 1,000 of them to speed up things and all those things, like, and he's like, I'm going to do 2,000. And so that's what I'm saying. That was the last thing he said to me in Memphis. He's like, 2,000 a day, man. I was like, I thought it was just 1,000. He's like trying to do twice as, whatever. So that's
attached to the sling.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure it wasn't like Kegels or something like that. But this is how a quarterback prepares.
Attached to the sling. Yeah, that's right.
Knew the quarterback offseason would be a really interesting one. Another little layer added to it in recent days, and
a layer that we were not prepared for, you or I.
Maybe things stand still for a bit of time, but probably like most other things in the world of college football, nothing ever really seems to stand still. So we'll see. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts so you miss nothing. As like sands through the hourglass, these are the college football days of just our off-season lives. This is the off-season, folks. It's supposed to be, at least, but the machine stays plugged in and keeps turning, I guess, year round. Chris, appreciate the insights and perspectives as always, man. Thank you for the time, and we'll see you for the next one.
Yep, let's go get a dub tonight, and we'll see what it all looks like in Manhattan, the Octagon of Doom this evening. One of the, I don't know, coolest or dumbest nicknames for an arena or building there is out there. I'm not sure which, but yeah, here we go.
The Octagon of Opportunity, at least for a few hours on a Tuesday night this week. Let's speak it into existence. Thank you so much for being out there. As always, shout out to the everydayers for always being there, and a big howdy to the Matador Mob. Thank you for being there as well. Hit the show notes, find the link for a free 14-day trial. It's your direct line to Chris and myself with one-on-one text sent straight to your phone. All right, thanks for the time. And as always, for Chris, I'm Casey. We hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.